Before you go any further, you should know this isn't the kind of story people usually tell out loud. Not because it's flashy or exaggerated, but because some things carry weight when you say them, like you're inviting them back into your head. What you're about to hear isn't campfire talk, and it's not something pulled from the internet for clicks. It's the kind of experience that sits with you long after the night is over, creeping into quiet moments when you're alone. People love stories about skinwalkers because they feel distant, like folklore, like something you can shut off when the video ends. This isn't one of those. This is about something that didn't follow the rules, something that didn't care what we believed. And before you decide whether to believe me or not, you need to understand who I am, where I work, and why I never wanted to tell this story in the first place. Asterisk, I should probably tell you who I am before this goes any further, because stories like this hit different depending on who's telling them. I'm Navajo Police. I've been wearing the badge for a long time. Long enough that the job stopped feeling like a paycheck and started feeling like a responsibility you carry home with you. I didn't grow up dreaming about chasing monsters in the dark. I signed up to protect people I know, on land I was raised on, where every road, every ridge, every stretch of desert already had a story long before I ever showed up in a patrol unit. This isn't some backwoods hobby cop situation. Navajo Nation land is massive, isolated, and unforgiving. You learn fast out here, or you don't last. I've responded to crashes where help was an hour away, domestic calls where emotions were hotter than the sun, and missing persons cases that still keep me up at night. I've walked into homes where the air felt wrong before anyone said a word, and I've stood outside at 3 a.m, listening to nothing but wind and my own breathing. When you do this job long enough, you stop jumping at shadows, and you stop believing in fairy tales. You trust patterns, training, and your gut. I've worked nights more times than I can count. Graveyard shifts on Navajo land are quiet in a way that makes your skin crawl. No traffic, no lights, just long stretches of darkness where the radio is your only lifeline. You learn how animals move, how people move, and what doesn't belong. Coyotes sound a certain way. Drunks stumble a certain way. Fear has a rhythm to it. So when something feels off, it's not imagination, it's experience talking. I'm not here trying to sell you some viral horror story. I've never done interviews, never told this at parties, never even shared the full version with other officers unless they were there. Most of us don't talk about the stuff that doesn't fit the report template. You won't find this in a case file, and you won't hear it in academy training videos. Out here, credibility isn't about how wild your story. It's about how long you've survived doing the job without losing your mind. And the reason I'm telling you all this now is because what happened didn't start with screaming or glowing eyes or anything dramatic. It started with routine, with training, with rules that were drilled into us from day one. Rules that came from experience, elders, and warnings passed down quietly. Rules we were trained to follow on Navajo land, and rules we thought would be enough. Asterisk out here, there are rules you won't find written down anywhere. They're not in a handbook, and nobody officially briefs you on them during training. You learn them the same way everyone else does, by listening, by watching, and by paying attention when older officers and elders lower their voices. Some of these rules are practical, like never trusting GPS after midnight, or never assuming back up as close just because it's on the map. Others are different. the kind you don't laugh at, even if you don't fully understand them yet. We're taught early on that Navajo land isn't empty, no matter how quiet it looks. Silence out here means something. If the desert goes dead quiet all at once, you stop, you listen, and you don't rush in like a hero. We're told never to whistle at night, never to respond to voices calling our names from the dark, and never to chase something just because you think you saw it move. Animals don't act like people, and people don't move like animals, but sometimes the line gets blurry, and that's where officers get hurt. Skinwalkers are never brought up officially, but everyone knows the protocols. You don't say the word casually. You don't joke about it. You don't act tough if someone older than you tells you to back off a location. We're warned that if you encounter something you can't identify, you don't engage unless you absolutely have to. Observation first. Distance always. And if something mimics a human voice, especially someone you know, you treat it like a trap every single time. Elders tell us that certain places don't want to be disturbed after dark. Old trails, abandoned homes, stretches of road where accidents keep happening for no clear reason. You don't linger. You don't explore. You do your job and you leave. And if your gut tells you to turn around, you listen to it. Out here, ignoring that feeling isn't brave, it's stupid. What really sticks with you is how serious everyone gets when these rules come up. No smirks, no sarcasm. Guys who'll joke through gunfire and car wrecks suddenly go quiet. They'll say things like, if it wants you to notice it, you already messed up. Or some things don't attack right away. They wait. You learn that the goal isn't winning or proving anything. The goal is getting home in one piece. We followed those rules. We respected them. We believed they were enough to keep us safe. And when the call came in that night, that's exactly what we thought we were dealing with. A situation we'd trained for. A threat we understood well enough to prepare for. The kind of call that makes you take a deep breath, check your gear, and remind yourself of everything you've been taught. Right before dispatch said the location, and the tone in their voice changed everything. Asterisk, the call came in just after midnight. The kind of hour where everything already feels thin, like the world's holding its breath. Dispatch tried to sound normal, but I could hear it in their voice, that slight hesitation, like they were choosing words carefully. Remote area, no clear address. Caller disconnected. That alone wasn't unusual. Out here, bad cell service. Is it given? What got my attention was the pause before they repeated the location. It was one of those places everyone knows, but nobody likes to talk about. A stretch of land that never quite shakes its reputation. I remember sitting in the cruiser for a second longer than usual, engine idling, dashboard lights glowing soft against the windshield. The night was dead quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. That should have been my first clue. I radioed that I was en route, and the response came back a little too fast. Like dispatch was relieved someone had said yes. As I pulled onto the road, my headlights swallowed the asphalt, and it felt like I was driving into a tunnel that didn't want me there. The details of the call didn't add up. The original report mentioned someone screaming, but not like they were hurt. More like they were trying to get attention. Then another note came through, footprints around a nearby property, barefoot, circling the house, but never getting close. No forced entry. No animals seen. The caller had gone silent after saying they heard their own name being called from outside. That part stuck with me. People don't usually volunteer details like that, unless they're genuinely shaken. The further I drove, the worse my gut felt. My radio crackled with static in places it normally didn't. GPS lagged, froze, then rerouted me down a road I knew. Was barely there anymore. I shut it off and drove by memory instead. The moonlight was bright enough to cast shadows that didn't seem to line up with anything real. Every now and then, I'd catch movement just past the beam of my headlights. But when I slowed down, there was nothing there. No animals, no people. Just open land and that heavy, pressing silence. I remember thinking, this is starting to feel familiar in a bad way. Not dangerous like a suspect with a weapon, but dangerous like walking into something you don't fully understand. I checked the time again, like that mattered, and adjusted my grip on the wheel. Training kicked in, breathing steady, mind focused. Whatever this was, there were procedures for it. Or at least, I believed there were. By the time I reached the turnoff, I already knew this wasn't going to be a normal call. It felt like the night had been waiting for me to show up. And as I stepped out of the cruiser and started checking my gear, I did what we're all taught to do in situations like this. I prepared myself for a skinwalker. When you're called out to something that hints at a skinwalker, it's not like gearing up for a normal bust or a simple welfare check. You know what you're dealing with is something that doesn't fit into any handbook or police training. So, you prepare differently. You double-check your weapons, not because you think a bullet will stop what's out there, but because it's the only thing that gives you a sense of control. You make sure your flashlight's batteries are fresh. You keep your radio close, even if you know it might go dead at any second. Mentally, you shift gears. It's not just about staying alert anymore. It's about respecting the old stories, the warnings you heard growing up but tried to push aside when you put on the uniform. Skinwalkers aren't just scary legends, they're a reality for those of us who live here. You remind yourself not to look directly into shadows or acknowledge voices you can't place. There are unspoken rituals, like walking backward when you leave a place, or never crossing a certain threshold after dark without permission from the elders. These aren't superstitions. They're survival tactics passed down because they work. That night, as I stepped out into the cold, dry air, all that training kicked in. I could feel the weight of the stories in my bones. The kind of stories that don't get told to outsiders because they don't want the fear to spread, but everyone inside the community knows. I checked my gear one last time and took a deep breath. The expectation was clear. We were going to face something dangerous, something cunning, something that could shift, shape, and fool your eyes. But you keep your focus, you keep your head down, and you remember the rules. No hero moves, no chasing shadows. You wait, you watch, and you hope that your preparation is enough. Because with Skinwalkers, you never know when you're dealing with the real thing or just a trick of the mind, but you have to act like it's real every single time. That night, I thought I was ready, but the truth, what came next wasn't anything like what I had prepared for. And that brings us to the moment when the first sign showed me something was seriously off, something that didn't fit the Skinwalker story at all, asterisk at first. It was the little things that got under my skin, those moments that don't scream danger, but quietly whisper that something's wrong. The kind of things you only notice when you stop trying to make sense of it all. Like the way the air felt heavier, almost sticky, like the night itself was holding its breath. The usual sounds of the desert, the rustle of small animals, the distant howl of a coyote were gone, dead silent. Not even the wind dared to move. I remember catching a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. Not quick like a rabbit or a fox, but slow, deliberate. Something pacing just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. Every time I flicked the light toward it, nothing was there. And when I turned away, I could swear I saw the same shadow slip. Just out of sight again. It wasn't right. It wasn't natural. Then there were the noises soft, almost like whispering. Not words, but a sound that felt like the earth itself was trying to speak. And those footsteps. Barefoot, slow, circling around the property like a predator sizing up its prey. Except the prints didn't match anything we knew. Too big for any animal around here, but too light and cautious for a person. I felt it in my gut, whatever was. Out there wasn't just hiding, it was playing with me. And the radio, it started crackling more than usual, throwing out bursts of static and faint voices that didn't belong to any of our dispatch channels. Sometimes, I swear, I heard my own name whispered between the bursts. But when I tried to focus on it, the static cut off, leaving me alone in the dark again. The weirdest part, nothing reacted like a Skinwalker should. No sudden shifts in shape, no animal mimicry, no eerie howls that chill your bones. Instead, there was this patient, almost mocking presence, like it was testing us, waiting to see what we'd do next. That's when the dread started creeping in. The kind that sinks low and settles in your chest, making it hard to breathe. Not the fear of running into a Skinwalker which, believe me, is enough to rattle anyone, but the fear that you're dealing with something entirely different. Something that didn't follow the rules we learned from elders or in training. I checked my gear again, radio in hand, heart pounding. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be like anything I'd faced before. Whatever it was rewriting the playbook. And that's when the real encounter began. But before I get into what happened next, I need to tell you how it all started. The moment when I first made eye contact with whatever was out there, that's where things really spiraled, and the tension went from low to something I still can't shake. Asterisk, the moment I saw it, everything went cold. Not just the air around me, but a kind of freeze that wrapped itself around my spine and squeezed tight. There it was, standing just beyond the flicker of my flashlight, barely visible but unmistakable. I couldn't make out clear features, too much shadow, too much distance. But whatever it was watching me. Not like an animal sizing up prey, but like something calculating, almost amused. I stayed still, breath caught in my chest. The radio went dead silent. No static, no chatter, just the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I tried to call out, keep things calm, but the words felt useless, swallowed by the dark. My flashlight trembled slightly in my hand as I focused on the shape, trying to push past the fear telling me to run. The figure didn't move much, just enough to remind me it was alive, or at least something pretending to be. Its eyes, or where? I thought the eyes should be, caught a glint from the light and held it. They weren't human. No warmth, no empathy, just cold. Sharp awareness that made me want to look away but couldn't. My heart was hammering, but my training told me to. Stay focused. I scanned the area, expecting maybe other signs, tracks, noises, anything. But the land was eerily still. No animals running, no distant voices. Just that unshakable feeling that I was being studied. Then came the radio crackle. Soft but clear, an almost mocking whisper of my name. My hand tightened around the radio mic, fingers shaking. I called for backup, but the static swallowed my words. It was like the night itself was cutting me off, isolating me. The realization hit me hard. I was on my own out there, with something I didn't understand. The tension built, thick and heavy, like the calm before a storm that never comes. Time stretched weirdly. Seconds felt like minutes. Every step I took, every breath I drew, was measured against that silent watcher just beyond the light. That's when I noticed it's something about the way it moved, not the quick shifts or contortions you'd expect from a skinwalker. This was slower, more deliberate, almost patient, like it was playing a game. And that's when the dread deepened. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just waiting. It was waiting for me. I knew then this encounter wasn't going to end like any other call. The rules I learned, the training I trusted, they weren't enough anymore. What I was facing wasn't just a skinwalker. It was something else entirely. And that's when it did the one thing that no skinwalker ever does, something that broke every rule I thought I knew. But before I get to that moment, I need to take you back to exactly what happened next. The moment where everything flipped and the nightmare took a new shape. Asterisk. What happened next is something I still can't fully explain, and honestly, it's the part that keeps me awake at night. I knew what a skinwalker was supposed to do. The stories, the warnings, they all paint the same picture. Quick changes. Animal sounds, eerie mimicry, disappearing into the shadows. But this wasn't any of that. It broke every rule. It did something no skinwalker ever does. I won't lie, there was a moment where I thought maybe I was losing it. The night seemed to twist around me. The figure stepped forward, but instead of vanishing or changing shape, it moved in a way that felt almost human. Too human. It reached out, but not with claws or a twisted hand, just a plain, steady hand, like it was trying to make contact. The thing's face flickered under the light, not shifting into some monster, but somehow distorting like a bad TV signal features, warping but never settling. That's when the air changed. I swear the temperature dropped so fast it felt like my breath turned to ice. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse. My radio sparked with static, but then something else came through, a voice. Not a call for help, not a growl or a scream, but a quiet, low whisper repeating over and over. It wasn't in Navajo or English. It was something else, something ancient and wrong. And here's where it got real. I remember trying to back up, but my feet felt stuck. Like the ground wasn't just solid, it was holding me there. The thing took another step closer, and my mind scrambled to process what I was seeing. It was no longer just a shape or shadow. It was watching me, knowing me, like it was inside my head. The rules we live by, the protocols passed down through generations, they were useless now. Nothing I'd ever heard or learned prepared me for this. No ritual, no prayer, no charm could cut through whatever this thing was. That's when panic set in, cold and sharp. because I realized this wasn't a Skinwalker playing by the old rules. It was something else, something older, something that didn't care about warnings or traditions. It wasn't hunting me like prey. It was toying with me, testing limits I didn't know existed. I don't know how long that moment lasted. Seconds, minutes, time lost meaning. But I remember the feeling of dread reaching a peak that no fear I'd ever known could touch. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, that's when it hit me what this thing was capable of that no Skinwalker ever dared. But before I spill what that was, I need to tell you about the moment it all clicked. That horrible realization that what we were facing wasn't a Skinwalker at all. Asterisk at that moment. When the full weight of what I was facing finally hit me, my mind went into overdrive. I'd spent my entire career learning to spot danger, to read the signs and patterns, know what was normal and what wasn't. But this thing didn't fit any box, any file, any story I'd ever been told or read about. It was something else. Something I didn't want to believe was real. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of tricker, shadow, a hallucination, maybe even a prank gone too far. But the way it moved, the way it knew things about me that it couldn't possibly have known, that wasn't human. And it sure as hell wasn't a Skinwalker. The panic was a slow burn. Not the kind that makes you scream or run immediately, but the kind that settles deep in your gut and twists tight. It's the kind of fear that makes you question everything you thought you knew. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to follow procedure, but inside I was scrambling. I was trying to piece together what this thing was, how it got here, and what it wanted from me. I remember looking around, hoping for backup, for another sign that I wasn't alone in this. But the night stayed still, the usual noises that fill the desert after dark were gone. Even my radio was silent, except for that weird static whispering nonsense. The isolation hit me hard. I was out here by myself, with something that didn't belong in any world I understood. The more I stared at it, the clearer it became that this wasn't about survival or territory. It wasn't just a predator or some cursed spirit playing its game. It was something that didn't just break the rules, it rewrote them. It wasn't hunting me like prey. It was studying me like a puzzle. Like it was testing how far it could push, how much I could handle. And that's when the denial started to slip away. I stopped pretending this was something I could control or predict. It wasn't just a Skinwalker. It was an entirely different kind of nightmare, one that I had no answers for. I knew then that the rest of the night was going to be about more than just getting through it. It was going to be about surviving something no one else wanted to admit existed. But the hardest part wasn't just realizing what this thing was. It was trying to get out of there, to leave the land it haunted without it knowing I was trying to escape. And that's a whole different kind of fight. So next, I'll tell you about the desperate attempt to get away trying to leave Navajo land. While something was closing in on me, something that didn't want me gone. Asterisk trying to get out of that place felt like stepping into a nightmare with no way to wake up. I got back into my cruiser, heart still pounding like a drum, hoping the engine's roar would drown out the silence pressing against me all night. But no matter how fast I pressed the gas, the road seemed to twist and stretch like they didn't want me to leave. The GPS was completely useless, kept rerouting me in loops, sending me down dead-end trails or back the way I'd come. It was like the land itself was bending around me, trapping me in a maze with no exit. I shut it off and relied on memory, but even then, every turn felt off. Familiar landmarks looked wrong, trees where there shouldn't be any, rocks piled up like markers I hadn't seen before. And then there was the feeling, that creeping sense that I wasn't alone, that whatever had been out there was still with me, watching, waiting. Every now and then, I'd catch movement in my mirrors, something just beyond the headlights, moving too fast to be human but too quiet to be an animal. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia, but I couldn't shake the cold prickling down my neck. The radio was dead again, the static whispering like a ghost refusing to let go. I called out for backup, for anyone, but nothing came back except the empty crackle. That's when I started noticing the time getting weird. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like moments. My watch kept jumping back and forth, like I was stuck in a loop, driving down the same road again and again. At one point, I swear the trees on either side leaned in closer, like they were closing in, and the shadows stretched longer and darker, swallowing the headlights. I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat. But the road ahead looked the same, endless and empty, with no signs of civilization. I tried to keep calm, kept telling myself that I just needed to find the highway, to find my way out. But every step felt like walking deeper into a trap. The feeling of being watched never left. If anything, it got worse. And then, just when I thought I might finally break free, something stopped me cold. Not a barricade or a fallen tree, but a silence so thick it crushed the engine's roar and froze the air inside the car. My breath hitched. The night itself seemed to hold me there, like the land wasn't done with me yet. I didn't know how. Long I sat there, trapped in that stillness. It was the kind of quiet that screams. Then, finally, the radio crackled back to life. But this time, it wasn't dispatch. It was that voice again, the same low whisper echoing just beyond understanding. That's when I realized escaping wasn't just about finding a road out. It was about surviving something that didn't want me to leave. But that moment, the final thing, I don't talk about it, something, even now, I struggle to put into words. It's the worst part of that night, the part I can barely say out loud. Next, I'll tell you about that final moment, the one we never discuss, the one that changed everything. There's a part of this story that I've kept locked away for a long time, the part that even now, it's hard to say without feeling like I'm opening a door I can't close. The final moment of that night is the one we don't talk about. The one that's stuck in my mind like a shadow I can't shake. I remember sitting there, the radio crackling with that low whisper that wasn't quite human, and the silence pressing in so tight it felt like the air itself was closing off. Then, out of nowhere, everything changed. It was like the world shifted on its axis. The sounds, the lights, even my thoughts scrambled and scrambled. The headlights flickered, the engine faltered, and for a second, it felt like time stopped. I looked up and saw something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't a shadow or a shape, but more like a presence. It filled the space around me, a heavy weight that made my skin crawl and my heart race. It wasn't angry or loud or even moving. It just was. And it felt like it was waiting for me to break. That moment didn't last long, but it stretched out in my mind for hours afterward. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My hands shook on the wheel as I sat frozen, trapped by a fear I couldn't explain. The world outside the windows felt distant, like I was in a bubble cut off from reality. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the presence was gone. The engine roared back to life, the radio went silent, and the night returned to its eerie stillness. But something inside me had changed forever. I knew that what I'd faced that night wasn't just a creature or a legend, it was something else entirely. Something ancient, patient, and beyond understanding. After that, I managed to get out of there. The roads opened up, the GPS kicked back on, and the normal world slowly returned. But the memory of that final moment never left me. It's the kind of thing you don't forget because it's not just a memory, it's a warning. A reminder that some parts of this land hold secrets that don't want to be uncovered. I don't share that part of the story lightly. Most of us in law enforcement, especially on Navajo land, keep these moments close to the chest. They're not stories to be told around a campfire or shared for clicks. They're lived experiences that change you in ways words can't fully capture. But there's more to this story. What the elders said afterward, how it shifted the way we patrolled at night, and why it's taken me so long to finally talk about it. So, next up, I'll tell you what the elders said after that night, and why those words still haunt me today. Asterisk after that night, I knew I couldn't just keep what happened to myself, but I also knew I had to be careful about who I talked to. Out here, the elders hold the knowledge that's been passed down for generation stores, warnings and rules that go way deeper than any official training. So I went to them, hoping for answers, or at least some kind of guidance. They didn't. Looked surprised when I told them everything. In fact, they were quiet for a long time, and that silence spoke volumes. Then one elder leaned in and said something I'll never forget. You walked where you weren't meant to, and you saw what we don't speak aloud. It was a warning wrapped in a truth that felt heavy in the air. There are names we don't say out loud, entities that don't just fade away when you ignore them. The elders explained that the land itself remembers, and some things are tied to it, ancient and patient. The stories about skinwalkers barely scratch the surface. There are forces far older, far darker, that live in the spaces between the stories. That night, I crossed into one of those spaces. They told me about the consequences, how those who encountered these things can't go back to the life they knew before. It's not just about fear or trauma. It's about a shift in your reality. The world looks different after you've seen what I saw. You carry a weight that others don't understand, and sometimes that weight can break you. The elders also reminded me of the importance of respect. That's something I grew up hearing, but it hit harder after that night. The land, the spirits, the warnings there, all connected. When you ignore them or try to fight what you don't understand, the price is high. They don't want to harm us, but they will if you disrespect their boundaries. What stuck with me most was the way they talked about silence, how some things are kept quiet not because we're scared, but because speaking them aloud gives them power. That's why the final moment I told you about, the one no one talks about, is barely whispered about even now. It's a name that carries weight, a presence that can't be summoned lightly. Since that night, patrols changed. The rules got tighter. Officers who once laughed off the stories started listening harder to the elders. There's an unspoken agreement now to tread lightly, to honor the warnings, and to trust the silence. I'm sharing this not to scare you, but to warn you. Some stories aren't just tales, their lessons, and the next part of this story is about how that night changed everything for me and my team on patrol. Asterisk up next. I'll tell you about how that experience shifted the way we watch the land at night, and why no one out here takes those patrols lightly anymore. Asterisk after that night. Nothing about our patrols was the same. You'd think we'd double down on our usual tactics, but instead, there was this silent shift, like a collective understanding that we were dealing with something way beyond normal. The stories we used to laugh off, the warnings from elders. We nodded to politely, they suddenly had weight. Real weight, the biggest change. We stopped rushing into unknown situations on a whim. Before, if a call came in, we'd roll out fast, guns ready, adrenaline pumping. Now, we slow down, we assess. We listen more closely to the land, to the silence, to those little things that feel off but don't quite make sense. It's like we learned that sometimes moving fast just gets you into trouble. There's this unspoken rule now. Never go alone. If you're heading into remote areas after dark, you better have backup close. Not just for safety from people, but because whatever is out there, it feeds on isolation. When you're by yourself, you're vulnerable in ways you can't even describe. We also started carrying things we never did before. Small talismans, prayer bundles, items blessed by elders, things that might seem superstitious to outsiders, but mean everything to us. It's not about fear. It's about respect and protection. It's a reminder that no matter how tough we think we are, we're not above the old ways. Some of the younger officers still try to shrug it off, but after what happened that night, even they know better. You see it in their eyes, the way they glance at the shadows a little longer, the way their voices drop when they talk about certain places. Fear isn't about weakness here. It's about awareness. It's about surviving. Our patrol routes changed, too. We avoid certain areas at night, especially ones tied to old stories or warnings. And if a call comes from those zones, it's handled differently, more carefully, more respectfully. We don't rush in like heroes. We go in like students of the land, hoping to avoid stirring something better left asleep. The thing is, you can't just treat these encounters like police work anymore. This is a different kind of law enforcement, one tied to culture, to history, and to forces beyond our understanding. It's a line we don't cross lightly, and through it all, the stories keep spreading quietly among the community and patrol teams. We don't broadcast them, we don't share them for shock value, but they're directed into our nights, reminding us to watch, to listen, and above all, to respect. But after carrying this weight for so long, I realized I couldn't keep it inside anymore. That's why I'm finally telling this story, because some warnings need to be heard, even if they're hard to believe. Next, I'll get into why I'm breaking this silence now, and what I hope you take away from hearing all this. Asterisk. I've carried this story with me for years, locked away tight, because out here, some things aren't meant to be shared lightly. But lately, something's been pressing on me, this feeling that if I don't speak up now, someone else might face what I did, unprepared and alone. It's not about fame or attention. It's about warning anyone who's willing to listen. You see, the world's changing. More people are wandering into places they don't understand. Tourists, thrill seekers, or just folks curious about the legends they hear on the internet. They come here thinking it's all just spooky stories or cool myths. But for those of us who live here, who've been taught to respect these lands and its spirits. It's real land, it's dangerous. That night, when I realized what was out, there wasn't just a skinwalker. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't just fear, it was responsibility. Because if I stayed silent, it'd be like ignoring a storm on the horizon. The signs are there, the warnings loud enough. But sometimes it takes hearing it straight from someone who lived through it to really understand. So, I'm telling this story for those who want to know the truth beneath the legends. For the listeners who crave that genuine, unsettling chill down their spine. The kind that comes from knowing the world isn't as safe as we like to believe. I'm sharing this so you can hear what I heard, see what I saw, and maybe, just maybe, be ready if you ever find yourself in the same kind of darkness. It's not just a story about fear. It's a story about respect for the land, for the unseen forces, and for the old warnings that our ancestors passed down. Because ignoring those lessons comes with a price. I hope by sharing this, I'm helping to keep others safe, to spread the kind of knowledge that can save a life. And if you take anything away from this, let it be that some things are better left alone. Some names are never meant to be spoken, and some nights, well, they're meant to be approached with caution. That's why I'm finally breaking my eye. Silence. Because the truth matters even when it's terrifying. Next, I want to leave you with one last warning, the kind that sticks with you long after the story ends. The kind that makes you think twice before stepping out into the dark. Asterisk if you've stuck with me this far. You probably already feel it, the weight of what I've shared. The chill that creeps up when the night gets too quiet, and the sense that some stories don't just live in the dark, they are the dark. Here's the thing I want you to take with you. Some things out there aren't meant to be named, poked at, or disturbed. You might think it's just folklore, just legends told to scare kids or keep people away from dangerous places. But trust me, those stories exist for a reason. There's a line, one you don't want to cross. A line between what you can see and what's better left unseen, between curiosity and survival. When you step into certain places after dark, when you start chasing shadows or looking for a thrill, you're not just risking a scare, you're inviting something in that doesn't forget, doesn't forgive, and doesn't play by any rules we understand. I'm not here to hype you up or blow smoke for clicks. I'm telling you this because I lived it. Because I saw the eyes that shouldn't have been there, heard the whispers no one else could explain, and felt the weight of something ancient pressing down like a stone on my chest. And it changed me. The elders taught me that silence isn't weakness, it's respect. That some names hold power, and some questions don't deserve answers. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. So, if you ever find yourself out on these lands, or any place where the shadows stretch a little too long and the night feels too heavy, remember what I said. Don't call out to the dark. Don't chase after stories you're not ready to face. And above all, respect the warnings written not just in words, but in the stillness around you. Because some things don't just watch, they wait. They learn, and they remember. That's the real horror out here, not the monsters we imagine, but the ones we don't talk about. The ones that exist beyond the stories, beyond the legends. The ones that don't need to be named to be terrifying. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there. The night isn't always as empty as it seems, and that wraps up the story I've been holding on to. If you want, I can help with more tales like this, or we can dive deeper into what those warnings mean in real life.